Right, I think we're live now, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had a chance to wander the exhibition hall and meet some of the suppliers. I know that they're very keen to have a chat and just, obviously share any of the new releases or new products that they have available in the workplace health and safety area. Our next session is around HSE in Australia with Greg McLoughlin from Health by Design. And Greg will help us join the dots between safety, mental health, injury risk, sleep fatigue, and health and wellness. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Greg, and thank you again for being with us today and presenting to our audience.
No worries. Thanks, Margot, and thanks everybody for attending. As per Margot's introduction there's a little bit to get through, so I will jump straight in and just a little bit about HPD International or Health by Design. We work primarily in the areas that you can see on your screen down the bottom right there, in safety and injury prevention, health and wellness, and also mental health and high performance. Probably our key point of difference, and this is some of the pieces that I hope I can share with you today, is that we use behavioural science methodology to really try to maximise engagement. And again, as you can see there with the, with voluntary program engagement at 95% plus, and also the idea of actually getting people to take action, which is really what we all want, getting people to make positive changes to whatever the identified risks are at 79%. So within this 15 minutes, the pieces that I'll go through is I've picked out hopefully a few sections around safety, culture, engagement, behaviour change that hopefully provide some take-home ideas that you can put into action immediately. And then I also look at that idea of joining the dots, between health, mental health and safety, and where some of the need is in that, and also some of the value. So just a quick little look at some statistics there, like just in really broad sense. Australia in general have been one of the leading countries in the world in terms of reducing the fatality rate. And you can see there that we've basically come down 49% since a peak in 2007, which is obviously fantastic news. But and obviously a lot of that has been systems driven. But what I've heard a lot from different organisations is that so many have reached like a plateau, and where the idea of medical treatment injuries or have sort of sometimes remained relatively stable, and that they'd really like to shift that. And so if we look at this issue around culture, engagement, and then sustaining the impact of initiatives that you're trying to put into action, I'll just run a few ideas past you, and I'll use case studies to do that. If you have a look at this, the first one was really, really interesting for us many, many years ago. We were running an injury prevention program for Heinz, and they had a massive issue on the production line with carpal tunnel syndrome and a series of other manual handling related injuries. And basically over the course of 12 months, their injuries reduced, and their lost time injuries reduced by 92%, which was enormous. And to be completely honest, at that stage, we didn't realise whether that was just good luck or whatever, because we were talking over 20 years ago, and prevention was really very, very new. So we started hunting around the world for other examples of places that had implemented successful injury prevention programs. And one that we found was this Georgetown, Kentucky one with Toyota. And what they had done, it was an incredibly, well, it was an expensive program, and it was, really well thought out in so many ways. They had a big problem with injuries within the first 6 months of employment. So they actually ended up doing an extended induction program that involved an ergonomic simulated production line, so simulated in a perfect ergonomic sense, so that they could actually train people to perform tasks exactly how they were meant to be performed and that they would like them to be performed. And they did 3 work conditioning sessions per week, which were pretty much like a boot camp type scenario to actually get the people work conditioned. and a whole series of educational workshops and training sessions. The end result was that there was an enormous reduction in injuries within the first 6 months, but by the time they'd reached 12 months, the injuries had gone back to normal. And when we really dug into it with them, what we found was that when those inductees had hit the production floor, a whole bunch of people that had worked there for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years or longer all said, "You're kidding. You don't do it this way. This is how you do it. Much quicker, much faster. I've been doing this for 20 years. Follow me." So the big thing was that cultural impact and the fact that, and we know behaviourally that human beings are herd animals that we will follow. So it's really critical, those behaviours that are repeated and are indoctrinated throughout a group. The next example that I'll give you is a commander from a US naval ship, the US Benfold, that this commander, Michael Abrasov, inherited the ship with the worst safety record in the Navy, and within 12 months he turned it into the ship with the best safety record. And he ended up writing a book called It's Your Ship, which gives you an idea of what they were trying to do with that whole shared responsibility and we're in it together type of approach. But one of his tactics was this idea of listening aggressively, and he listed it as one of his golden rules. And you can see from the pieces around the outside here, this is 8 drivers of behaviour change, and they're all key items that influence behaviour in any given circumstance, whether it's safety related or health related. And with him, and he actually got around and spoke to each of the, I think it was roughly 380 crew members, and that gave him great insight into their social norms, what their current knowledge and capability was, what sort of context he was dealing with, what were the habits that he could observe and see and hear, what were their issues. And so it was a really big scenario. Go to the third example. A guy that I worked with for a number of years, I originally met him when he was working for Wholesome in the concrete and aggregates business as general manager of Victorian Aggregates. When he was at that location, he used to have his area managers once per month go and work on a site in the role doing the job. And his idea was very similar to Abrasov's idea of actually fully understanding the risks and what needed to be done. And mind you, Bill was doing this, I'd say 15 years ago. He went on to become CEO of Fulton Hogan in New Zealand. So he's obviously a really smart operator. And I think it actually ties into a guy that you might have heard of, Professor Sidney Decker, working out of Griffith University, and has wrote a number of fantastic books in the safety area. And one of his catch cries or phrases is this idea that we really need to bridge the gap between how work is imagined and how work is done. And if you really think about that, it's so critical, and it's really what Abrasov was doing. It was what didn't occur with Toyota in Georgetown, and it was getting done in the Bill Perry example that I gave you, was that not just sitting there and imagining what perfect looks like, actually finding out what they need to do on the ground to actually get it done. So some really interesting ideas around, really digging into that culture to really get that true engagement that'll actually drive sustainable change. So I hope that gives you a few little ideas there. A big bugbear of mine over many years is this idea of complexity. A number of years ago, I walked into a trade shop as some work that we were doing in Alice Springs, and a very frustrated store manager came to me, and he had a 96-page safety manual in his hand for one of his hundreds and hundreds of products that he had in that store. And this 96-page manual related to the cans of spray paint. And he said, Now, Greg, am I meant to read all of these 96 pages? And we both sit there and talk to each other and I said to him, look, you know what's really sad is that somewhere in amongst that 96 pages is probably some really critical information about what's going to kill you. And we've all in this whole safety area been confronted by this overwhelming complexity to the point that it is almost illogical that people can follow some of these things. So so one thing that I would encourage you from a take-home point of view, and it's something that we've tried to live by, not easy, but a Mark Twain quote there, sorry I wrote you such a long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one. And you all know that it takes a long time to actually get, whether it's an email, whether it's a document, to make it short, succinct, punchy, and get to the point is really difficult. To show you an idea of that from a case study point of view, we have worked with Lockheed Martin for a number of years in Australia and New Zealand. And we worked with them at a number of their locations in New Zealand where there was some injury issues. When we first started working with them, they were actually bound by some New Zealand Army protocols, which meant that the manual handling workshops were 4 hours in length. And you know, basically, that they were relatively ineffective. And so some of the work that we have done with them has culminated in bringing those workshop lengths back to 25 minutes. And, you know, to give you a little bit of an idea of the areas that it looks at, it's really refining it back to this point of what matters most, like what are the most important things for us to look at, you know, to look at the actual load pressures between doing a task, you know, using the right equipment or with the correct ergonomics and posture, you know, versus doing it the incorrect way. What is the difference? And people's physical capability to be able to do the work, and also this idea of where possible, linking it into their life focus. So really critical. They had some excellent results in the early phase, and they're just about to go into this next phase of that program. So your actual content, like in the last example, becomes really, really critical because a very, very early lesson for me as a practitioner, delivering a manual handling workshop to a group of locomotive mechanics, they were completely disengaged early on. And then all of a sudden, when I put a slide similar to this up, and I started talking about the ergonomic challenges of changing a brake block, which hadn't been changed for 2 years, and they're trying to balance this 25 kilo brake block while hitting it with a sledgehammer with the other hand, we were able to talk through how there was no perfect ergonomic way to do that. And and all of a sudden they were engaged, and I asked why, and someone said to me that their previous session had been from a weightlifter teaching him how to lift. So while that's an extreme example, similar things apply to generic workshops around this, that if we put the idea of just lifting a box or a lot of the usual things in front of a group like this, it will be disengaging. So the content can be really critical. I put this one in.
Just 1 minute to go, I'm afraid. It's gone very quickly, but
not a problem, that's fine.
Thank you.
And so yes, so just looking at this one here, that in the safety and purpose, I would encourage you, this never gets tired. So tapping into human purpose is a fast track to changing behaviours. So it's a really, really good one to look at. And similarly, another idea that I would throw in front of you is that we have generic safety systems. However, everyone is wired differently, and we know that inherently. So it's something that I'd get you to give some real thought to, is just knowing that people are differently. And probably just lastly, and summing up, because you'll get a little bit of this information, is that you know inherently that health impacts safety. And if you have a look at this little example here, that this is a big group, and 80% of them were engaged in the program. Of those 80%, they accounted for 37% of the injuries. 63% of the injuries came from those not engaged. But the interesting thing is that everyone injured also measured high risk from a health perspective. So,
sorry, Greg, we've just cut off.
no, that's fine.
So anyone watching on Zoom can still hear us, but everyone coming in through Events Air has been disconnected, going back to the timeline ready for the next session.
Perfect.
So we will send the recording off to everyone. Greg, thank you again for participating, and we'll touch base with you very soon.
Thank you, Margot.
Thanks, Greg. Bye-bye.
Ciao.